there's a big world out there. And I encourage people that are early or midway through their career just to take a step back and learn something new. It can be about their industry or it can be about something else.
Yes. Hello and welcome to our first in a series of Financial Currents with ZISHI, where we'll be having discussions and conversations with leaders, innovators, and practitioners within the financial services industry. Hello, my name is McConkey. I'm Head of Regulatory and Compliance Services for ZISHI. I'm joined today by Jamie.
Thanks, Graham. My background is in the sales and trading markets businesses, where I reached Managing Director in an investment bank. I'm an approved partner of ZISHI, and I now run my own consultancy company.
One of our first topics, Jamie, and we've been talking about this before this event today, is looking at some of the challenges and events that we've had in our careers, going back 10 to 15, 20 years, and looking at those in particular and what we would have done differently.
Well, I think in general in financial markets, change management is absolutely critical. And I think everybody can do that better. And I think, especially at the moment, there's a huge amount of change going on in the world. There's a huge amount of change in regulation that has been for the last 10 years in financial markets. If you look at how we deal with change personally and create a culture of change within organizations, I think that's something I would have spent more time on. Specifically, how personally, you deal with regulatory change and how much impact that actually has on the business. I think my background being from running sales desk, sales businesses within markets, I think that the focus is always on the bottom line, which is fine. That's absolutely fair enough. But I think what shapes the future of profitability is the industry as a whole, how it's been regulated, how you adapt to that regulation, and how you put your business at the forefront of any change. Too often, the business is focusing on the bottom line, which again is absolutely fine, and rely on the compliance function to filter through what the next regulatory change will mean for the business. But I think what really needs to happen is the compliance function and the business. The business takes more of a lead and more of an interest in what the regulatory change is coming down the pipe, and has more input in how to position the business for profitability. And the compliance department, they work as one rather than two separate entities.
In terms of some of the challenges with the business and compliance working or not working together, what have been some of the problems that you've come across?
Say, for example, MiFID II best execution. I think this is going to affect every department, every sales desk, every trading desk, every other service area in an investment bank or in a buy-side firm differently. It tends to happen at large firms is there's a sort of one-size-fits-all approach to regulatory change. So what will happen is there will be a discussion at a management level or regional or global compliance level of this is the regulation coming in. It will then be distributed to the businesses altogether. And I think potentially more thought needs to be done on the specific impact on each different business of this particular regulation. And I think best execution to me was met with a huge amount of panic when it came out as part of MiFID II. It was, this is coming down, this is going to stop us doing business effectively. But what I think should have been done, again, I've mentioned the fact that compliance and the business should potentially have discussed this together, a little bit more of a coordinated approach, because if you use the compliance knowledge and the business knowledge and understand why the regulator is making these changes, that's a huge start. That's the most important start. You understand the reason and the requirement of this change.
How would you understand the regulation? What would you do, or what would you advise for people to focus on, to not just hear about it?
Yeah.
We talked about change management, where the difference between hear and understand. Hearing, I've just heard it, but really understanding what it means and the impacts to me and my business.
So don't ignore it, first of all, because there's a huge temptation, I think, at large organizations and when and I'm talking about from my experience, when you're in the sales trading markets environment, you're so focused, you're at the coalface, you're at the day-to-day. Okay, I'm going to continue doing my job until this slaps me in the face. That is a difficult position to take. So lift your head. I think the first advice is have conversations. View your compliance executives, your compliance colleagues as a partner and a source of information. But take ownership yourself. Take responsibility for knowing the regulation that affects your particular role. So everybody heard about MiFID II, everybody heard about best execution. If you're in a sales or a trading function in markets, it is going to affect you. And you need to understand that. So you have to do your own research, but you also have to have communicate more effectively with the other areas of the organization that you're working in to understand what their view is and how they think it's going to affect the organization as a whole. And then having those conversations and doing your own research, you can then narrow that scope down to how it affects your role specifically.
Right. And you mentioned, which is very important to me and very personal to me in terms about change management, where one of the areas from my experience over the years is that right at the beginning, we don't do anything. We don't think about the vision, where we're actually going. What is the aim of this? We get into the detail and the objectives too quickly of the practical side of, well, we need to change a system or a process, or we want our staff members and employees to do something differently. But we forget about, well, why we're doing this in the first place. What are the real impacts? Where are we trying to get to? What is the vision for our team and the company, which is what you are mentioning in effect on that understanding.
That goes back again to taking a step back in understanding the motivation of the regulator. Why are they asking us to do this? So how the change management process can be hugely helped by understanding why, instead of, okay, fear, we're going to have to change process here. Let's look at the process. First of all, understand why the regulator is asking or insisting that the industry do this. And I think with best execution, it boils down to they want to ensure that the end client receive the best possible price. And that is it. And if you're running a reputable and street leading business, you want to give the clients the best possible price. And that should be part of your DNA. And I think that's what the FCA want and will continue to want that requirement for the client to get the best and most transparent price all the time. Yes. To run, and that should run through the whole organization from front office to operations to the code of conduct, to the way people conduct themselves. And I think once you understand that, you can start the change management process.
We talked about the feeling there is constant regulatory change impacting a person, the individual, and the company and the teams as well. So those fears and barriers from your past, if you were doing it right now, how do you turn that fear and barrier into an opportunity for the opportunity for you and the business?
Yeah.
How would you
get people's buy-in? I think first of all, I think too often it's an us and them mentality. It's regulators, compliance, business. This is an industry. So there's so to move the industry forward, you have to move forward together. So I think you create a culture that people take accountability for change. That you can do this by communicating early with your team, communicating early with the other business functions, and explaining the motivations. Like I said, the motivations for the change from the regulator. You explain the motivations for the firm to get on the front foot with the regulatory change, and then you can put a process in place. But what you need to do is get buy-in. I think sending out mass emails to the whole company saying, read this, this is coming, understand how it affects your job is fine, but that not in its entirety.
Exactly. And that goes back to the first part of hear and understand. So when people are hearing about a change, they're just hearing it. They're not assimilating it. They're not thinking about it. They're not considering it. They've just heard it, which is usually done by the first mass communication.
Yeah.
There's that next bit of communication of understanding and really understanding
Yeah.
how it impacts me. And do I need to change or improve my skills, my behaviors, my knowledge? and exactly what support I will get. So it's that you said, lift your head, which is a really interesting statement lift your head.
And it's
up.
the manager and the team's responsibility. And we've talked about this, is creating a culture of common sense when it comes to change and regulatory change. And you only do that by asking people what they think and asking people to have accountability. I think it's if you're managing a team, it's asking the people that are doing the trading, doing the sales on a day-to-day basis, how they think this is going to affect their job, what their concerns are, but also what their solutions are. And you do that by communicating in a grown-up and honest manner. I've seen this happen in organizations where the mass email, the online training, when it's a little bit more removed, you're not getting that instant buy-in because people are not having the opportunity to voice their concerns and also voice their solutions and their thoughts on how to best implement this into the business.
So I think we're going to have 2 points from today as well, which is culture of common sense and also that common sense, how do we make it come in practice? And we talked there about leaders in terms of who the leaders are. I think importantly is understanding who the managers are. So the managers that have direct responsibility, which we mentioned them a moment ago, of individual and teams. What should they be asking themselves, especially in our new world of AI and ChatGPT and all of the technology that is here and coming down the line incredibly quickly? How do managers work within this new world? And over 2026, what should they be thinking about and challenging themselves?
I think, first of all, what they must ask themselves is, do they understand the change that's coming? Do they genuinely understand the detail of it? Do they understand how it impacts their business and their team? And the second thing is that they should do is communicate effectively with the team about it. And again, I'm going back to it. That's not necessarily, it can be creating a culture of consensus, but it's creating a culture of feedback. How people switch off and how organizations turn into a box-ticking culture when it comes to regulation or any change matter really is when people don't feel part of it. So people have to feel part of the solution and they have to understand the problem and they have to feel part of the solution. And that's what the manager needs to do. They need to get that buy-in and that consensus.
One of the important things to me when I was building a team, and a training team and a change team, was to build this community, diverse community of people that you can lean on and you can also learn from. So not just in your team as well. So we talk about how to build rapport relationships with other people outside the team. But this is really important to me, is that you need to really think about building a community, a diverse community, a different culture over the years.
It's got to be authentic.
Moved. Yes.
The culture is never forced. Culture comes from creating an authentic environment. An authentic environment can come from a culture of common sense because you're allowing people to take ownership of what they're doing. And you're allowing people you've created a diverse team, you're allowing people to speak their mind, you're listening. But it's the same thing. It is the same as a culture of common sense because you're empowering people to be authentic, but also to feel confident that they can do their job.
We talked about training there and the graduate programs and many of the programs and courses we run through ZISHI. As you said, we use practitioners, real people that have done the work, done the jobs, so they understand and therefore can train and teach and develop people. A lot of the companies are starting to look at how do we do more face-to-face training. Obviously, over the last number of years, 5 to 7 years, because of COVID and other opportunities where people have been at home, online learning, hybrid learning has been a big thing. But there's been a notable change over this year where people are starting to come back into the offices and want something there. So from an employer's management and leadership, they need to trust them, but they need to help and develop them.
I think there's a time and a place for online learning, but I think face-to-face learning and shared experiences and the opportunity to ask questions and just to get a feel of the room is is massively preferred. I've been refreshingly surprised at the demand for face-to-face, and I think it's, you know, that two-way dialogue, because it's very easy to switch off online. I think and this goes back to one of our original points about regulation and how you buy into change and buy into to putting yourself in the best position for the changing nature of the financial regulatory environment. You've got to be interested in it. Face-to-face learning would always be my preference, but I think there's the place for online learning is for very specific courses where you're already potentially experienced in that field, and you're already bought in, and you want to learn that because you understand certain parts of it, and this is taking you to that next stage.
A number of programs, particularly with ZISHI, has been running over the last few months, where, for example, conduct rules or senior management certifications, some of the markets, we have noticed where they want them live. Even if it's only 2 or 3 hours or half days, they want them in the offices so we can have the practitioners there and we can discuss real life case studies and scenarios.
People talk about AI and it's going to revolutionize things, and it is, but there's been a lot of other things gone before in financial markets that have revolutionized things, regulation, the closing of floors, the electronic trading, all sorts of different cost of capital. There's a huge amount of change that has gone before. What the manager needs to do and what the team need to do is they need to continue to work on their own team working skills, because again, AI can look after some of the process driven, which don't necessarily require any human interaction. But the financial markets is still a relationships business, and AI is starting to come through and is going to make huge efficiencies, but it's not going to take away from the core of financial markets, which is you need to be good at working as a team. Like you said before, you need to be able to gain the trust of your colleagues. You need to work in an environment where you feel you can feel authentic and you can feel backed and you can feel confident to do your job without fear of reprisals. So but these things, in order to do that, you have to look at yourself and go, am I good at fitting in a team? Am I good at the job that's in front of me? Yes. So you can control those controllables, and AI looks after some of the other things that potentially you can benefit from as well. But looking at yourself and look, am I doing my best possible job to make this business more successful? Am I integrating in the team well? Am I a good people person?
So the manager, so AI and other technologies stripping away that, really focuses on the manager's skills and how they do that. Yeah. So rather than getting rid of certain tasks and jobs, what they really need to focus on and concentrate on is the skills, the soft skills.
You need to be able to trust your instinct and trust yourself to come up with the right conversation, the right thing to say, how to manage that situation. So that's what ZISHI helps with, is with the experienced practitioners that train many of the courses. They've got that lived experience, and the translation of the management speak or the culture notes into real life examples is the most important part.
So as a manager or leader, particularly a manager, is recognizing their team. So understanding what they did, how they actually did it, and noticing it. Really noticing what
that's a skill actually. And I personally, I remember I got some feedback that I should celebrate wins more. In my management experience, and because I was I guess sometimes too focused on moving on to the next thing. Again, talking about that environment of constant pace, constant change. But yeah, you should take time to recognize people, to say well done, because that goes back to that human empathy, and that people require that. It cannot just be about dollars and cents. It had, there's when we went to see Obama at at the O2 a couple of weeks ago, and he talked about values and recognition and how potentially you rise above some of the difficult macroeconomic situations that we find ourselves in at the moment, and that's important. Take time to stay true to your values, but also impart them on other people.
There were 14,000 people there as well.
It wasn't just you and I.
It was just you and I with Obama.
An audience with,
an audience with Obama.
Yeah.
But that's, in terms of managers, they can learn how to do feedback. It's probably the classic, they do an online course, or they do a course, but that noticing is really important. And being able to describe it back to, Jamie, this is what I noticed. This is really describing what I saw and how you did it. So the person, adult to adult conversation goes, oh, they are listening. They are seeing
Being authentic is also not just doing what you want to do. That's a different thing. Being authentic is being yourself, but yes, listening to feedback of how you can do things better. Because there's humility about that as well. There's a humility to being authentic, right? I'm my authentic self. I'm relaxed to come into work and be myself today. But I'm humble enough to go, if a colleague or if a manager says, look, we need to do these things a little bit differently, or you need to, look at these things in a slightly different way, you listen to that and you accept that, okay, that's part of my learning journey as well. It's not just about everybody coming in and being very confident and people clash. You do need to have to, yes, there needs to be that consensus, that compromise, and you need to be able to get on with people.
As you mentioned, we do many courses and programs and run graduate programs. All of those amazing people that are coming in were very quick minds, obviously not much experience because they're just starting their careers, but they will have obviously lots of life experience, technology experience. What are the kind of two, three things you would say to them to really think about and focus on, say, for 2026?
Yeah. As they move into the workplace, make sure make sure you practically implement what you've learned. At the end of the day, you come into the workforce, and whatever workplace you're in is a business. So what you've learned needs to be practical. You need to implement that practice into the business. The business is there to grow, to be profitable. So work out not only how you can further your own career and collect additional skills, how those skills are practical to making the business be more successful. Because I think sometimes that gets lost because there's so much information. How do I make myself better? How do I grow my skill set? How do I get more qualifications? That's all brilliant. But if you sit down next to somebody and they don't trust you to do your job because you haven't practically implemented what you've learned, or you haven't listened to how the business works, you're not going to be as successful as you could be. So this is what the title of the podcast, In the Real World, things don't always go as you want them to go. Every career's got its ups and downs. But be authentic, but also be humble that you need to implement what you've learned and continue to learn. Everybody needs to continue to learn, but it needs to be focused in the right direction.
You need to do something every year to keep this brain going. Wow.
I fell into that trap that you're describing. Probably in the middle of my career, when I was in that producer manager role that would be, you're very busy doing the job, but you're also busy managing people. I became very narrow. In other words, I came into work, I did my job, I serviced the clients, I managed the team, but I almost didn't have time or didn't have the inclination to lift my head, like we discussed earlier, and understand what the next trend in the industry is. Right. What is the next, it doesn't need to be regulation. What is the next event on the horizon, in the macroeconomic world? What's the political situation? What is going to impact the future of my career? And so sometimes to take a step back and go, I want to learn something about a subject that I'm interested in. Mm-hmm. That learning and that wider spectrum comes from having a network too. So connect with people in your organization and in other organizations that do things that interest you, have interesting conversations. There's a big world out there. And I encourage people that are early or midway through their career just to take a step back and learn something new. It can be about their industry or it can be about something else.
Yes.
And don't become too narrow.
No, so I've been in financial services for 30 plus years and done many qualifications that are necessary to keep your job or get a new job, as many industries now obviously have minimum requirements in terms of qualifications. But I do sometimes feel that stops my brain working. And it stops me thinking about other ways and solutions of how to do things. So as an individual, as a new graduate, for example, how can they be authentic? How do they motivate themselves? How do they find interest in things that they enjoy to help them with their career? And then on the reverse, the manager, as we talked about, needs to do the same as well. They need to be able to not just motivate themselves, but how do they motivate their team? How do they recruit them? How do they train them? How do they motivate them? And
they've got to know them as a person as well. Like, got to respect them. So I remember, at company, I spent a long time and I was involved a lot with the graduate hiring, and I'd see graduates come in and they'd be so keen to impress. They'd be very highly educated, very good, very good, but they were so, focused, almost too focused on, progressing very quickly through the organization. And I think I would say to them, don't stay here till 8 p.m. and just, go and do, what are your interests? Go and make sure you spend time doing those at the weekend. Leave on time tonight so you can do that interest that, because they are, with their world experience and their enthusiasm for the job, will be much more if they have that outlook. But it's difficult because, like I said, like we've discussed, that the environment now for people coming into an industry, there's a lot, like we discussed here, there's a lot of automation, there's a lot of jobs that are being potentially under threat. But the people that will continue to rise to the top are the rounded people. And so I'll always advocate for that. And I wish I'd done it. Again, looking back at my experience, I dropped my interest. I only got back into running in my 40s. I was a keen runner when I was a kid. I didn't do it because I was too busy trying to build a career for myself, get into the city life, take clients out, all the rest of it. And you can soon find yourself
just doing that.
And it becomes your lifestyle.
So in terms of the graduates and other people starting their careers, we've talked a number of things I really need to think about doing, but also that challenging themselves and doing things that are a bit difficult, but not impossible.
Yeah.
Because if we do things that are too much of a stretch and then you don't achieve it, it does hurt with motivation.
Yeah. You have to be realistic. And I think this world now, and it always has been, people are very ambitious and they want to get forward very quickly. But I think some periods it is absolutely okay to do your job. And we've talked about graduates a lot, but this is relevant for all periods during your career.
Moving jobs and changing jobs and careers.
You're never going to get into trouble by doing your job very well. And if you are struggling to do that, and if things are going a little bit, because we're talking about, again, we're talking about career progression and graduates coming through and reaching milestones, but actually it doesn't happen like that. So sometimes give yourself a break. You don't always need to have these very, very difficult goals to achieve. First of all, I think I mentioned before, is focus on your soft skills, your people skills. Understand what you're good at when it comes to team building or team working. Understand, if you're a good communicator or if you're, more of an introvert, and understand what role that would apply to. And I think so. As I mentioned earlier, I think that becomes even more relevant with AI, because I think the ability to be a good teammate and be a good colleague is even more important now with some of the more processing tasks potentially moving across to to AI. So I think that's one thing. I think the other thing is be aware of the regulation. We've talked about regulation a lot, but I think 2026 is an absolutely critical fork in the road potentially for UK regulation in financial markets, because the UK and the EU have potentially fallen behind a little bit when it comes to global markets and growth, especially the UK with growth and productivity. And I think the regulator realizes that. And I think in 2026, I think there may be not a loosening, but a rethink around some of the regulation to allow that growth in the UK and Europe. Between the regulators and the financial authorities. So I think understanding and keeping abreast of that is absolutely key, and I think will allow you to flourish in a career in financial services, because I think that change is going to keep on happening.
I have to embrace it. I have to understand it. I need to learn about it. I need to build up some of my experience and skills and soft skills.
And make it practical.
But really make it practical.
Yeah. And also, I think we've talked a lot about culture and the culture of common sense, and I think we can have a wider discussion around that as well.
So we're looking at embracing and embedding change. We're looking at the practical applications of innovation and technology, but that really focus on yourself, on culture of common sense.
Yeah.
And making sure you can do your job really well, do it well, think about it, and expand your mind.
Yep.
And take it from there.
Brilliant. Thanks.
Jamie, that's been really good conversation. Thank you very much for your time today.